If you have a strange or scary story you want to hear on the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. I'm a 43-year-old female, and this happened when I was 23. I was married at the time and we had a 1-year-old daughter. We were moving into a new house, but it wasn't quite ready yet, so for a few months we lived above my husband's aunt's bar. Now, for a backstory, we lived at the time in a small town in Montana. His family has been there for generations. His aunt owned a large bar that had a small dance floor, and there was a bowling alley in the back. The building was huge. This building was well over 100 years old and had been a brothel, a schoolhouse, a restaurant, and now the bar/bowling alley. It definitely had history. The old, dusty, unrenovated apartment above it was just as big, but we lived rent-free for a few months, so we didn't complain. Now, this town is small, as most are in Montana, so everyone knows everyone in all of their business. So at the bar, all the bartenders hated closing at night. Some of them would see a little boy at night running around. The bowling pins would fall in the dark. You would close the bar down and lock the door, and suddenly all the window neon signs would come back on. I didn't mind it, and was never scared in the actual bar when I started taking over the night shifts. The apartment above it, however, was a different story. I hated being there alone. My 1-year-old would scream at night in her room like she was terrified. The apartment was very large and had several rooms. The house was separated by a very long hallway. Living room on one side, bedrooms and kitchen on the other end. I would hear footsteps at night, and you could tell that they were cowboy boots because of the way they walked along the hardwood floors. I knew this was an old brothel, and even in some of the closed-off rooms that were hidden behind insulation, the old wallpaper was up with bullet holes in it, and old pieces of furniture that were literally 100 years old. Most of that stuff had been blocked off with insulation, and we did not go in there. There was a single smaller room that, whoever lived there, did a lot of woodwork. So the floor in this room was literally raw wood, and you had to wear shoes when you went in because the walls and the floor were just covered in splinters, and it was not safe to be in. I hated that room, because even when the apartment was super hot in the summer, that room was always freezing cold. As soon as you crossed over into the threshold, it was cold. So I had a desk and some storage and a couch that had thrown in there, and I only went in when I absolutely had to. This room was catty-corner from our master bedroom across the hall. One night, my now ex-husband was sleeping and snoring so unbelievably bad that I had to leave the bedroom before I smothered him with a pillow. The couch wasn't super comfortable, but the pull-out couch in this cold room was a lot easier to sleep on, so I decided to go in there that night and sleep so that I didn't have to hear him snoring so bad. I decided to leave the lights completely on, and that way I would be fine. I hated it, but I eventually did fall asleep, and at about 4 in the morning, my ex-husband's alarm started going off. It woke me because it didn't wake him, and all I could hear was the alarm going off on top of his snoring. So I yelled at him to get up. He rolled over and hit snooze and went right back to snoring. I laid there, super irritated, because I knew that alarm was going to go off again and there was no way I was going back to sleep, so I just laid there with my eyes closed. Well, once again, the alarm started going off, and so I was yelling at him to shut it off, and I sat up on the pull-out bed and opened my eyes. It was like a disco club in that room. The light switch was being flipped super fast, and turning the lights on and off, on and off. It took me a real minute to realize what the hell was going on, and that's when I stood up to leave the room, and he was standing in the doorway. It was a super dark black shadow. It was definitely a man because he was tall and dressed like a cowboy. He was leaning with his arm up on the door and his one leg crossed over the other, and he was staring at me. You could see the outline of his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots, and he had his hand on his hip. Normally, I love this kind of stuff, but when you actually see it in person, it scares the crap out of you. So I screamed for my ex-husband and went running out of the room, and as I got to the doorway, he disappeared. I was almost hyperventilating, because I've never actually seen a spirit. I've just heard them and had things move and doorknobs shake and things like that. But that never really bothered me. My husband at the time was just irritated and thought I was having a bad dream, and told me that there were no ghosts in the apartment. Fast forward about a month, this was right before we got our new house and moved out. My husband had been drinking one night, and I knew he was going to snore really bad, so he slept on the couch in the living room and I slept in our bedroom. It was a long hallway between the two, and just as you got to the end of the hallway and turned, that was where the opening of my door was at. So from where I was laying in bed, I could not actually see down the hallway. He was laying on the couch, and I knew that he wasn't asleep yet because I didn't hear the snoring, and I was laying in bed reading a book. All of a sudden, in the dark, we could hear really heavy steps walking down the hallway, starting at his end and walking towards me. You could hear the cowboy boots, and how heavy the steps were that they were walking very slowly. And just as the steps got to the end of the hallway, probably 10 feet from where I was laying in bed, they stopped. Had the spirit walked just 4 more feet, he would have been standing in the doorway and I would have seen him. But the footsteps stopped, and all of a sudden the apartment got extremely quiet. So I called out to my husband and asked if he heard it. He was extremely quiet for a minute, and then he said, "Yeah, I did hear it. I'll be sleeping in bed tonight with you so you can deal with my snoring." It scared the living hell out of him, and we moved out shortly after, but he never corrected me when I said that place was haunted afterwards. Back when I was a teenager, my parents liked to go to Montana and see the state, plus as many ghost towns as we could. I wanted to be as cool as my brother, so we would sneak off time to time and smoke a cigarette as my parents read every single sign through the town, so it took them forever to get where we were. Now, keep in mind, my dad and I have always had things happen to us when we walked through, but nothing too crazy until that day. I can't remember what the town was, but as soon as we started walking, it just felt odd. As I said before, it took my parents forever to read everything, so my brother and I went ahead and snuck away for the cigarette, and then after we were done, we went into this building, and when we got to the stairs, the door slammed closed. Thinking it was just the wind, we continued to the second floor, and that's when we started hearing voices. Not the normal talking, but children's voices. And they got louder and louder, and then the screaming of the adults started. We looked at each other and tried to say anything, but the other voices swallowed our voices up. I was ready to get out of there, so I ran down the stairs first, got to the door, but it wouldn't open. My brother tried to open it, but he said that it felt like someone was pushing it closed. Us freaking out at this point, we banged on the door and my parents came and opened it. We ran out. I just couldn't get the noises out of my head. The crying, laughing of children, and the blood screaming of adults was just too much. My parents were reading the sign out front of the building when we started banging on the door. They never heard any of it, just us banging on the door. As it turned out, That building started out as a schoolhouse, and then it was a makeshift hospital when there was a war going on. And then after that, it was where people went to die because of the various diseases that went through the town. And now I'm an adult with children of my own, and when we go to ghost towns, I do not go in the buildings, even if it's okay to. Dear Raven, your channel is one of the best out there. Thanks for that, and I hope this story can contribute. It turned out a bit long, so I'm sorry for that. I don't know where to begin properly, but it involves my grandpa and the gift you could say that he had. A little background, I'm from a rather big Dutch Indo family. Dutch Indo is about the best way to translate this, I think. There are families from the former Dutch East Indies colony of mixed European and Asian heritage. I don't know if our Asian side has anything to do with this, but my grandpa always had dreams that proved to be partly predictions or had some kind of meaning in them. My grandpa seemed to know more than most of us, or seemed to be in closer contact to some hidden spiritual side of life than most of us. Like, he once had a dream in which an angel showed him a passport with 92 in it. He believed it meant he was to become 92 years old. But it turned out, my grandmother was to pass away in his 92nd year. His dreams were always cryptic like that. And it was always in hindsight that you could say, well, that probably foretold something. Another one was where he dreamed of two sparrows sitting on an electrical cord, like you see stretched over the countryside. The first sparrow is then hit by some kind of projectile, falls down to the ground, and died very quickly. The second sparrow is then also hit but lives and struggles. I believe Grandpa dreamed the fact that my aunt was diagnosed with cancer and died 2 weeks after, and then my uncle was also diagnosed with cancer, but he lived for another year or so before he passed away. About himself in his 93rd year, he asked my cousin if we, the family, could sing the Christmas song Silent Night, Holy Night at his funeral. This was quite out of the blue somewhere in summer, in July or something. So my cousin said, "Sure, Grandpa, anything you wish, of course." My grandpa was to pass away on Christmas Eve of that year. Now, the Dutch Indo culture, or at least our family culture, focuses on personal modesty in favor of the family, which is why we are very close despite being a big family. I had 5 uncles and 6 aunts, and I have about 25 cousins, and the older ones all have children. My grandparents' modest apartment always was everyone's second home, and you could always just drop by for coffee, or a meal, or just to read a magazine. It was all good. I remember as early as a young child, you would sit on the ground. When you were a little older, you could sit on one of the stools, and as you got older, you could have a spot on the chair or the sofa. Until the house got full of older family members, and then you moved a step back on that ladder again. This is to describe how special it felt to me that my grandparents loved everyone in that family, but that I felt you as an individual shouldn't expect to be noticed very much. Not that it was a bad thing, just a small sacrifice to be part of such a big, loving family. Now for my personal story that I would like to submit. I myself have never been very good at school. You know how teachers used to say how you are there for your own future and not for them? Then why do I have to be here? I would think, as a young kid and stupid kid. A few decades later now, my fiancé says I have problems with authority. I naturally disagree. I'm not one to be fighting all the time. I just tend not to listen to people that don't interest me. Okay, so maybe she's a little right. But that made me drop out of school before graduation year, and then I went to work. I figured you could either suffer through school longer than I did, or you would have to accept lower-end jobs with less pay. I always felt there had to be something that I would be good at, but most people aren't, so that I could earn decent money doing that. Of course, the wise adult would talk that down immediately to make you conform to school and everything. But then, after about 10 years of dead-end jobs, I found a training program to become public transport bus driver. None of my family had ever done such kind of work, so it was a bit of a leap for me, but I took it. The selection process was tough, but I managed a cognitive capabilities score that, on average, only 1.74 people out of 100 would score better than me. I'm proud of this, but also must say that I have some talent, right? The complete program took 2 years. The first year would be 3 days working and 1 day of school. The second day would be 1 part official school subjects so that we would get an official diploma. The other part would be learning about the whole public transport operations side. At the end of the 2 years, you would have paid back half the cost for the driver's license from working, and the company would gift you the other half. Then you would be set with a decent job, of course. At the end of the program, there would be a graduation ceremony, and a day prior, I got a feeling that I would be asked to say a few words on behalf of the class. With all I told about my grandpa at this point, I can safely say that I do sometimes have these feelings, or intuitions, too. Mostly when driving. I would have a thought or feeling that I should take it a bit more easy ahead, and then I would turn the corner to find that something would have happened there, or traffic would be partially stuck. So the day prior to the graduation ceremony, I thought, if I'm to speak in front of everybody, then I'll start off with a joke. I'll thank them for the honor and then pull out a stack of papers, as if I had prepared a massively long speech. To that end, I looked for some papers that I could fold and stuff into my pocket for the next day. I found a stack of papers, and I randomly picked up the upper portion of them to see what they were, but they were too valuable for that. You see, since somewhere in the 70s or 80s, my grandparents always had a notebook lying in their apartment. Anyone who would come over would write something, anything in it, if they would like. It was a very early low-tech version of what would now be a family group chat. Then, when my grandpa passed away, my uncle took the project upon himself to go through all the boxes of notebooks and type out every entry of my grandpa's, and other stories that my grandpa told about his time in the Second World War and such. He then printed them and gave them to my dad and their siblings, and my dad gave his copied stack to me, because I like history and stuff. So, I put the top portion of the stack down beside the bottom part, and went ahead with my plan with some different papers. We had a great graduation day. I was, in fact, asked to say a few words like I expected, and I dreaded it a bit, but the joke worked out well and everybody laughed. A few days later, I came across that stack of papers again. I was going to put them away neatly, so I double-checked because I forgot which would be the top and which would be the bottom. That's when I noticed the page that had come to face up after I took the random portion off. The very last entry on that page immediately drew my attention. It was a bit on what my grandpa had dreamed on the 26th of November 2011, which was titled, "A Weird Dream." This is the interesting bit, and as literally translated as I can. I dreamed I was in a bus on my way home. Very vaguely, I knew that I was on the bus with my mom. We rode for a while, and all of a sudden I was alone in a different bus with different passengers and an Indo bus driver. Before, I may have read it and didn't think much of it, but given these circumstances, I immediately thought, wow, did my grandpa ride along with me? Mind you, I entered into the program in 2018, so some 7 years after my grandpa dreamed this, and after he would pass away on Christmas Eve of 2011. Now, in the present, both of my parents and all 4 of my grandparents have passed away, and although I miss them all the time, I quite often miss my paternal grandpa. A couple of the bus routes also pass right by my grandparents' old home, and I have so often thought about how cool it would have been to tell Grandpa what times I would pass, and I'm very sure that he would have waited by the window to wave at me. I'm actually crying right now thinking of all this. I hope you can work with this, Raven, or in any case, I thank you for reading this. I love to listen to the stories you read while being on the road doing my rounds, so please, keep it up. Hey again, Raven. You know I'm all about true crime and interesting cases. That's why when my dad told me about his experience back when he was young, it was freaky. Here's his story. My dad was still pretty young. His dad, my grandfather, had an office literally next door to the apartment building. That was good given at the time there was a war in my home country. Obviously, for security reasons, I won't say where. Anyway, my grandfather told my dad to go get him an important file from his office. My dad agreed instantly, since, quote, I was a good boy, he told me. He went to the office building next door. By the way, I have to mention that there was no electricity due to the conditions of the war, so the elevator was not working. So my dad went for the stairs to the very last floor. It was a building that had an effect on you that includes seeing your shadow go behind you with every step. It was a building with shades of sun from the windows that went all across the stairway. I hope that makes sense. So, at one point, my dad has almost reached the very top floor until he noticed something. His shadows, his reflections, had completely stopped. I mean this as in instead of them going with them, it stopped completely still on a floor he was now above. My dad describes that, in that moment, he started skipping 4 stairs at a time out of fear. After he told me this, I was creeped out. His shadows that were supposedly going with him at his speed completely stopped in its tracks and were no longer moving with him. That was all from me, and I just had to share this with you and your viewers, to see what you all would think about it. It could have been an hallucination from the building effect of the stairway, and I'm willing to believe it was. Much love, homie, and keep up the great work. Thank you, Cryptic. I hope I don't sound completely crazy sharing this. Hearing these stories about ghosts and spirits who moved on helps me to feel like my experience was validated. Either that, or I truly was crazy at the time the story occurred. It involves my first and only instance where I felt like I truly went elsewhere in my dreams. I was 16 years old when the pop singer Michael Jackson died. He was someone I adored, and I knew everything there was to publicly know about him back then. Please, no critical judgment. Back then, I was an only child without a father and just a few friends. Michael, with his music and magnetic personality, was my distraction from my life of isolation and trouble connecting with people. I could identify with some of his issues: the body dysmorphia, the pressure from family with unique religious views, and having a painfully obvious skin disorder fueled from stress. I can never claim to ever know what it would be like to be in his shoes, but I saw him. I saw the pain. I knew what some of it felt like. I was desperately trying to figure out who I was with little guidance. I loved him and was, admittedly, a little obsessed. Michael was the only father figure I could get, and identified with many of his flaws. I would be an entirely different person today had I not discovered him, as all the other kids at the time listened to artists that dwindled in comparisons. This was the mid-2000s. You can check out yourself what artists sang about. I didn't care for much of it. Michael's work revolved around love and kindness and seemed to really care about people. I was aware of the allegations made against him and determined that he was innocent. Even now, as an adult, being a parent myself, I'm pretty sure his behavior was a result of arrested development and a lifetime of mistreatment. He didn't do what they accused him of. It was proven the parents were faking the kid's illness and wanted money. But moving on. His death crushed me. I mourned him like I had lost a family member. The news of his passing briefly broke the internet. The world was stunned, and I felt like a part of me died. Silly, yes, but to me it was like I had indeed lost my father. The world was that small. So, with all that said, let me tell you what the late King of Pop has to do with my story. I believe that I can at least partially tell when there is a spirit nearby. No, I didn't see or hallucinate Michael Jackson, the world-famous pop star, in my house. That would be truly insane. But before his death, I could swear there was a portal close by somewhere. My bedroom was in the furnished basement. More than once, it sounded like someone was walking down the steps. Once, at night, I was startled awake by the sound of someone in my room ripping a poster off of my wall. Another few times when I had friends over for a sleepover, one told me in the morning that she saw something in the shape of a man passing through. Sometimes my computer or television would act up in the same inexplicable way. This is what piqued my interest in ghosts and the paranormal. Not long after he died, I had slipped into, I'm not sure what, a trance? The only way I could describe it was that I was and was not asleep. My consciousness was in two places at once, and in my mind's eye, I was standing in a huge, dark, round room with a dome overhead filled with clouds. It's been said that those who pass away can visit you in your dreams or send you messages. I wondered if, since I was half conscious, I could try reaching out to Michael. No such luck. When I told my then boyfriend, now husband, about what I experienced, he warned me not to try it again. It had something to do with running the risk of letting in bad spirits or something. He really hates it when I open spiritual doors. A few weeks later, I had an experience that hasn't ever happened again, to this day. For 3 consecutive nights in a row, I had vivid, lucid dreams. I was aware that I was dreaming, but this did not wake me up. In these dreams, all of my senses were present except for smell. Everything was more vibrant than in reality, especially the colors. It didn't stop these dreams from being nonsensical, such as being an infinite parking garage turning into a rec hall, cruise ship, but I wasn't alone. In these dreams, Michael was present in some form or another. It felt more like he was in the background more than anything. He, at least my subconscious version, was there keeping me company. It was like I was sharing this place with him, exploring the dreams for the adventure and fun of it. We even said our goodbyes instead of me just waking up abruptly from the morning alarm clock. The second night, his form was growing warped and fuzzy, and the last night of these incredible lucid dreams will stay with me for the rest of my life. He was hugging me goodbye, and it felt permanent. It really felt like I was being hugged, and my view was centered on a bright and blue sky, when I didn't have black, curly long hair blowing in my face. It was like a wordless goodbye, and I haven't had another lucid dream since. More recently, in present day, mediums have claimed to have been able to connect to Michael in the past. I don't know for certain spirit boxes are real for sure. You know, those devices that can allegedly let you hear the real voices of those who have passed on? To some who use these spirit boxes, Michael has been known to visit these mediums regularly. These mediums say he has a strong spirit, and that's why he can be felt so easy. So, that's what made me think back and wonder whether my lucid dreams were real or not. Or whether I really was delusional and a grief-stricken girl standing over a pop star. Anyway, that's my story, and I hope it was somewhat entertaining. So, I have this friend that comes over at 6 a.m. every day because his parents work, and so he wakes me up, and it goes on like this every day. One day, I heard a cold breath say my name, and I jolted awake. All of a sudden, my friend was in my room, so I thought that he was tricking me, and he denied it. And I believed him. But later on, we were talking, and all of a sudden, I heard that same cold voice say something about leaving. And then all of a sudden, the camera in my room that my parents use tells us to start walking to school. And to this day, I've never heard that voice again. But that's my story. Sorry, it's short. So that, my friends, was a collection of some paranormal stories, chilling paranormal stories, for you all to enjoy as we creep ever closer and closer to Halloween. We keep inching our way towards Halloween. I mean, of course we are. It's a specific day of the year, so every hour that passes is us getting closer and closer to Halloween, so even after Halloween, you can look at it as X number of days till the next one. That's how I do things. Because this is my season, I guess? Question mark? I don't know. Is this really my season? I mean, it's the spooky season, right? And I guess I do scary and strange stories, so it really should be, but I don't know. I kind of like all of autumn and winter. I feel like the last 6 months, not really the last 6 months, more like October, November, December, January, February are like my months. That's only 5. That's not 6. I'm silly and cannot do math. Not saying those are my months, but those are the months that do best. Though that's not really true either, because randomly August and June do well too, as does March. So, you know what? Who even knows what I'm talking about even more? And even more? Oh no. Me here talk good, no bad talk me do. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. Good stories. Good stories. Yep. If you did enjoy them, please hit the like button on the video, the thumbs up. That'll help the video do better. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting the subscribe button. That's the subscribe button, if you don't know what subscribe means. It doesn't mean anything, I'm just silly. If you want to leave a comment under the video, just having a quick chat with me in there, you can do that. I will happily talk with you. Or give you a heart, depending on what the comment is. If it's not really a conversational piece, then I'll give it a heart at least. Typically, I'll say something. I try. If you want early access to content like this and other content, please consider going to Patreon or hitting the join button down below the video. Both those get you early access to this content. The Ko-fi, that's K-O-F-I, link down in the description gets you to the page to buy the signed posters I still have. You can also do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. Never expected, but always appreciated. Which, I say that all the time, and it's silly to say because tipping culture is so silly. I would never expect you to tip me for reading stories. It's more like just supporting the channel, donating to support the channel, I guess. I don't know. You don't have to do it. I don't expect it, so. Yeah. I think that's everything. My stuff's also available on Spotify, Pandora, remembered it first this time, Apple Podcasts, things like that. And yeah. Hope we're having a... Sorry, that's my fidget thing I have here, and I keep closing it. It keeps clicking. I don't mean to do that. Sorry. Hopefully you're all having a beautiful week so far. Hopefully I'll see you again here very soon, like tomorrow. But until then, remember that you are loved, that you are valued, that you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.